A 16-year-old girl who lived in the same house with her parents and younger sister went to sleep in her room, and in the morning she was found dead. The police immediately realized that they were dealing with a murder, but none of her relatives heard anything that night. It took 31 years to finally solve this case, but no one was ready for such a turn of events. Fawn Cox was born on March 24, 1973 in Kansas City, Missouri. Soon her parents had two more daughters. The family lived in a small two-story house located in a poor residential area. Since early childhood, she helped her parents take care of younger children, regularly went to church, and was fond of swimming. When she turned 16, Fawn got a part-time job at a local amusement park. Her family lived quite poorly, and the girl was eager to earn at least some money in her spare time. She spent most of the 1989 summer holidays at work, mostly standing at the ticket counter and selling tickets to rides. When she turned 16, Fawn got a part-time job at a local amusement park. Her family lived quite poorly, and the girl was eager to earn at least some money in her spare time. She spent most of the 1989 summer holidays at work, mostly standing at the ticket counter and selling tickets to rides. On Wednesday, July 26, she finished her shift at about 10 p.m., and her mom and younger sister picked her up by car, since it would take a very long time to get from the park to her house by public transport. Almost immediately after returning home, Fawn went to bed, as she had to go to work again the next morning. The girl slept on the second floor. She had a separate room. Her sister usually slept in the next room, but that night she was alone. Her sister Amber, who was only a year younger, was working as a babysitter for a family she knew that night. Another sister, Felicia, decided to sleep on the ground floor because it was much cooler there. It was a very hot night, and the air conditioner was only working downstairs. Their parents also slept on the ground floor. The next morning, at about 9 o'clock, the whole family was awakened by the sound of an alarm clock in Fawn's room. But for some reason, the girl didn't turn it off, and her younger sister and mother went up to her room, where an eerie sight awaited them. Fawn was lying on the bed without signs of life. Bruises were visible on her neck. The girl had no pulse, and her parents immediately called an ambulance, but they could no longer help her. It was obvious that Fawn had died a few hours ago. After examining her body, medical experts determined that the cause of death was strangulation. The girl was also subjected to violence. From the very first hours, the police realized that they were facing a very difficult investigation. Despite the fact that Fawn was killed right in her room in a small house with very poor sound insulation, her parents and sister heard absolutely nothing. However, there was an explanation for this. The air conditioner on the ground floor was old and worked very loudly, overriding any other noises in the house. The only oddity that night was noticed by Sister Fawn. Their poodle was acting alarmed and barking, but they didn't pay much attention to it. This behavior was attributed to the fact that the dog was pregnant. After examining the crime scene, the police made several important discoveries. According to their version, the attacker or a group of criminals entered the house through a second-floor window overlooking the backyard. An old trailer was parked near the house, which made it easy to climb onto the canopy of the extension, located almost at the same level with the window. The window itself was left open because there was no air conditioning on the second floor, and it was necessary to somehow deal with the heat. In Fawn's room, experts found the first important clues: several short hairs, small blood stains, and traces of semen on the sheet of her bed. All this was sent to the laboratory for analysis. In addition, several items were missing from the house, including a radio, a Nintendo game console, and a stereo recorder. Several more items were found on the ground in front of the house. It looked as if the robber had thrown them out the window to take them with him, but for some reason had left them there. Detectives also discovered that various items had been exposed from a closet in an adjacent room on the second floor. In their opinion, the criminal was hiding in that closet, waiting for all the residents of the house to fall asleep. The Fawn sisters usually slept in this room, but not that night, so no one noticed the items on display. The police managed to find another strange clue. An old army cap was found in Fawn's room. All of her relatives said they had never seen this object in the girl's possession, so detectives assumed that the killer might have forgotten the cap at the crime scene. Despite the impressive set of evidence, the police were unable to quickly identify the suspects. The problem is that in 1989, DNA testing was poorly developed, and no common genetic databases existed then. Detective Benjamin Caldwell, who was involved in the case, put forward the main version of what happened. In his opinion, there really could have been several attackers, and they must have known this house well. Not only did they know how to get to the second floor through the backyard in pitch darkness, but they also had to know the location of the rooms. The police's next step was to look for witnesses. They interviewed Fawn's neighbors, friends, and relatives, but it didn't bring any results. The detectives faced one weighty problem. The area in which this house was located was very poor and criminal. Various criminal gangs operated in it, the participants of which were quite difficult to bring to justice. A month after Fawn's murder, the case finally got off the ground. The police had a witness who pointed out the three suspects. This witness knew a number of important details that the police had never disclosed, so his story was taken seriously. These suspects turned out to be three teenagers, one of whom studied with Fawn in the same class. They were arrested and interrogated, but the boys denied any involvement in the murder. During a search of the house of one of them, the police found things stolen from the victim's room. That was enough to charge all three of them with murder. But here, too, the detectives were disappointed. However, things soon did not go as the police had expected. Despite the presence of stolen items, there was insufficient evidence that it was these teenagers who killed Fawn. When the interrogations began, two of them firmly denied their guilt, and the third, a 17-year-old boy named James, stated that he had indeed broken into the house that night. However, he claimed that he did not kill Fawn, but only sneaked inside to steal the equipment. According to him, he entered the house through the backyard, climbed onto the roof of the extension, and entered through an open window. At some point, he realized that someone was in the house, got scared, and hurriedly ran away, throwing some of the stolen items through the window. At first, detectives were sure that he was lying, but the examination did not find his DNA at the crime scene. James' genetic material was missing from the sheet where the biological traces of the perpetrator were found. This put the investigation in a dead end. If not him, then who? As a result, the lawyers insisted that the murder charges against the teenagers be dropped, and James was charged only with theft. He spent several years in a correctional facility and was soon released. After that, the case reached a dead end for many years. Despite the abundance of evidence, the police did not have a suitable suspect, and no new witnesses appeared. Decades have passed. Fawn's parents died without knowing who killed their daughter. Her younger sister, Umber, continued to live with feelings of guilt over that night, because if she had stayed at home, perhaps everything would have turned out differently. But then, in 2020, something happened that finally gave the investigation a new impetus. In recent years, DNA testing technology has advanced significantly, and the police decided to re-examine the evidence. They sent DNA samples found at the crime scene to a laboratory for analysis, using the latest methods using genealogical databases. A few months later, detectives received the result. The DNA matched the profile of a man named Marcus Harper. Marcus lived in the same neighborhood as Fawn in 1989, but he was never on the suspect list. He was several years older than the girl, and at the time of the crime he was 22 years old. He had previous convictions for theft, but nothing related to violence. When he was arrested and interrogated, he denied his guilt for a long time. However, there was too much evidence. His DNA was on both the sheet and the cap left in Fawn's room. Under pressure from the evidence, he finally confessed to the murder in 2021. He said that night he broke into the house with the intention of robbing him, but when he saw a sleeping girl, he decided to attack her. After committing the crime, he threw away the stolen items and he fled the city. Eventually, he returned and lived a normal life, unaware that he would ever be found. In 2022, Marcus Harper was sentenced to life in prison without the right to parole. After 31 years, justice has finally prevailed. But for Sister Fawn, who had been living with the pain of loss for decades, it was only a partial relief. In an interview, she said, "I'm happy that the killer was found, but it won't bring my sister back. Every day I think about that night and ask myself one question: what if I had stayed at home?"